All right, good afternoon, Marlins fans. Welcome to another episode of the Miami Marlins Prospects Pod here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network YouTube channel. My name is David Fernandez. I am here, as always, with Joe Frisaro from manontoND.com. Today, we're excited to come and talk Marlins baseball with you all because as we know, the trade deadline is looming at this point. We are less than a week away from the trade deadline. The Marlins have been sort of active in talks and listening to offers and probably making offers of their own. We're here to kind of work you all through that, kind of talking what maybe some of these hypothetical trades might look like, and then what some of the prospects that might get a look at the major league level, who those guys, the next set of guys in the pipeline, so to speak, are. Because this week we saw the debut of J.J. Bleday, who we've talked about for a long time this season. We saw Lewin Diaz get another call. You know, we'll get through all of those things. But here we've got some expert insight with Joe. Joe, how you doing? What's going on with all these possible trades?
David, this is a fun time, and it's let's make this a really fun, informative podcast because, you know, there's stuff being reported, there's stuff that I'm hearing as well. And so it's not going to be your conventional straight podcast show, prospect show, but we're going to kind of dive in and on the Marlins. And this is what I could tell you. I think you're asking, are they buyers or sellers? We know they're only like 4.5 or whatever it is, but still 5 under, but it's a very soft 5, 4.5, 5 out. The schedule gets dramatically more difficult in August, and the reality is they're more on the sell end, but I could see them, David, selling, but maybe not like a wholesale type of sale, sell, get everybody must go. And I'm sure they'll kind of frame it after it's all said and done that they will sell off players, but still kind of try to make a run at that 6th wild card spot in the second half. It's not going to be a gutting down. I can tell you the guys that this is not the meat of the show, but the guys that are probably most likely to move are the relievers. Yeah. The Anthony Bass, the Stephen Okerts. Those are those that there is already a strong market for them. 1 or 2 of them could be gone, and their thinking is they got AAA guys, AA guys. We've noted them, and we got to take a little credit, right? Because a couple of weeks ago, no one had the name. Huskar Brazaban.
That's right.
Yeah, 32 years old. We threw him out there as a guy who could come up. 32, making his major league debut, bringing heat. Very good scouting by the Marlins, and they got a very good scouting staff anyway. But down in the Dominican Republic, they found him, unearthed him. Guys like that could kind of help see if they can make kind of a late season run. But those are the guys that probably will be moved definitely. Now the possibly, and maybe a strong possibility, kind of going to be a focus of this show, is Pablo Lopez.
Yeah.
And Pablo pitched great last night.
I can tell you,
he was really good, as we know. And his name, we've thrown his name out there for a while as well. I know on the Man on Second podcast, we've done it as well. That it's if the season turns south, to get to make a call on some of these guys because, Pablo's, he's in his ARB years, his cost going up, his trade value is at its absolute highest. Yeah. And, we've noted before, we're looking at a Sandy Alcantara, Yuri Perez kind of top of the rotation down the line, and which could make Pablo, more attractive to others. I can tell you this. The first game of the series, the days run together on me, David, I believe it was Monday against Cincinnati when Trevor Rogers pitched. Now, people are in on him too. Don't get fooled by the 1-loss record in the high ERA right now. He's got a market. There were about 8 scouts, from what I'm told from some people I have in the industry, that were in Cincinnati. Last night, Tuesday night, 10 scouts were there from other teams that now they're in. I could tell you among those teams were the New York Yankees and Toronto Blue Jays. And that doesn't mean that others weren't in there looking at Pablo. It doesn't mean that the Marlins are going to move Pablo. But, from a prospect standpoint, Pablo to Toronto could make a ton of sense, David.
Yeah.
And this is us talking. This isn't me hearing intel, but I did talk to somebody in the league from another team and proposed this trade, which I think has a very interesting one which would be Gabriel Moreno, the number 5 overall prospect in baseball, according to MLB Pipeline. He's a catcher, of course, 22 years old. He and one of these 2 A-ball level outfielders, Deshaun Brown and Gabriel Martinez in a Blue Jay system. If the Marlins were to do something like that, they would get their everyday catcher in Moreno, who projects high end. Now, Brown is more of a true center fielder, apparently like Gold Glove worthy, and he hits pretty well too. He's from Canada. He was the 3rd round pick of the Blue Jays in 2019. He just got promoted to Vancouver from Dunedin. That's their high level A team. 4 homers, 783 OPS, 267, but 20 years old, young, apparently runs. And Gabriel Martinez is an interesting hitter. He's in Dunedin right now, which is the low A affiliate, who we could see when they come by Jupiter and play the Marlins low A team. Hit 297, 10 homers, 42 RBIs, 849 OPS. Martinez, from what I understand, profiles more as a corner outfielder. Brown would be more of a true center fielder. I find this a very fascinating type of possibility, David, because you can address 2 needs. Yes, it comes at the cost of Pablo, but what's your thoughts on something like that?
Yeah, so this idea, I mean, we know that the Yankees, just to go over to them for a minute, we know that they're looking for pitching, that they're in on starting pitching, and it makes a lot of sense that the Blue Jays would be in on starting pitching as well. And when you look at this graphic, I know Anthony Volpe is on there too, and we'll get to him in a minute.
Yes.
But if the Marlins were able to get Moreno and plus either Brown or Martinez, that would be a pretty good haul for Pablo, who, as you said, is really sort of at the peak of his value at this point. He struggled with injury issues at different points in his career. I mean, season-ending injuries in 19 and in 21. So he's healthy this year. He's already set career highs in strikeouts and innings pitched. So, I mean, if the Marlins are going to sell, they're selling high on Pablo Lopez. And if they can get Moreno and Brown, I feel like that would be a pretty good haul, because, I mean, Brown actually feels to me a little bit like almost like Juan Pierre with some pop to him. He's got 41 career stolen bases over 131 games in the minors. He's got a pretty healthy on-base percentage at 352. He's got an 80 run grade over at MLB Pipeline. So this kid can fly. He would be a great addition to that outfield down the line. And then Moreno, obviously, as you mentioned, he's a high-end prospect. He was their number 1 prospect in the Blue Jays system. And they've called him up recently with Toronto. He's played 18 games with the Blue Jays this year, hitting .310 with an 844 OPS. These are guys that, sorry about that. These are guys that could make a real difference for the Marlins down the line. I mean, Moreno would sort of be a plug-and-play guy. It complicates things, I guess, with Stallings, having traded for Stallings last year. So do they want somebody like Moreno? And we've seen Nick Fortes, look pretty good. And they've drafted catchers recently with Joe Mack, so it would be interesting to see if they decide to go for somebody like Moreno in a potential trade package for Pablo Lopez. But it would be interesting for sure. And I think Brown should be the target more than Martinez, because there seems to be this sort of hole in center field, certainly in the upper minors. JJ Bleday had played some in center field for Jacksonville. We saw him play center field for the Marlins already, and he's adequate out there. Peyton Burdick, who we'll talk about later, he's played a lot of time in center field. But again, these guys don't profile as sort of traditional defensive center fielders, and I feel like Brown would do that, plus that speed. I mean, it would be an interesting haul for Lopez for sure.
Yeah, and back to Brown, being like this guy on the grade scales way up there. This is Gold Glove caliber, like you say, go get it. Center field profile and fits all that. The thing like you mentioned with Stallings, they could obviously look to potentially move him. If there's another team, if they wanted to clear the decks and go with there. But I was wanting to raise this because this is what I've heard from some of my people. The Marlins are in the market for center field, and they're exploring all of it.
That
You know,
makes
I
a lot
know
of
the
sense.
popular names are the Brian Reynolds and
Yeah.
Ramon Laureano out in Oakland. Those are the names most mentioned, but it doesn't just stop there. So they'll be exploring a lot of that. Now, the only thing with Brown is you're waiting a little while,
Yeah. 20 years old.
but yeah. And that's just going to have to be the trade-off. You get immediate help now. You potentially, and I know internally they feel that, like you noted, Blade and Burdick as possibilities to man it out there, along with De La Cruz and Sanchi, of course, can go back out there as they kind of try to figure it out as they kind of go along. And you can kind of see what they've done the first two games of the series with Cincinnati. They kind of have been looking to see what they got a little bit more than the urgency to win. I mean, they had, some of the lineup construction, obviously injuries are an issue right now, but they're running guys out there. They're not playing every game like it's game 7. They're just seeing what they can do, and right now the season's kind of win one, lose one type of stage against this soft part of their schedule, which isn't exactly a reason to become full.
That doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, as an all-in buyer. So again, they're in on center fielders, and this is just one scenario. You did note Anthony Volpe and the Yankees, as we noted. John Heyman, right before we came on the air, he tweeted out that the Yankees are in on Frankie Montas and with Oakland and Luis Castillo with the Reds, and he said others. And I do know that people in the Yankees organization are very high on Pablo Lopez. And I could definitely see conversations there. And as you know, with Volpe, he would be the marquee guy, whether the Yankees want to move him. Again, I think he's 7th on MLB Pipeline's top 100 shortstop. A year ago, he had 27 bombs. He's got 13 now. He just went up to AAA. But a few other names, and Volpe's up at AA, Somerset. That kind of leads you to, if you're going to, do something in the middle of your infield with Miggy Rowe after this year, or if you want to clear the deck and Miggy could kind of be a utility guy if he's not moved, and which he has been open to. But it gives you, it changes your lineup. You get the high-end young prospect, just 21. You match him up with Jazz in the middle of the infield. But a couple of other names, which could also possibly be part of a package. Oswald Peraza, who is at AAA, apparently a little bit better defensively at shortstop. I think there is a little concern with Volpe's stick at short. Does he move to third or second? That's always a possibility. But Peraza appears to be a little bit more of the everyday guy at shortstop. And we mentioned this guy's name before. It's probably just a short-term fix, but he can play center field. Estevan Florial, who has played in the big leagues, lefty bat, can run, could do a lot of things. But a package for Pablo or others could kind of include some of these names we're mentioning as a possibility. Again, this is our speculation. This isn't me directly, other than telling you directly the Yankees and Blue Jays were among 10 teams, at least 10 teams known that were at the game in Cincinnati last night, watching Pablo Lopez and others.
Yeah, and so if the Yankees are looking for pitching, it makes a lot of sense to at least look in on Pablo Lopez. He's somebody that would help their rotation right away, and I think he would be a good fit in New York. And I feel like the package that New York could put together, as long as they're not saving all of these guys for Juan Soto, which might very well be, what's going on here. Volpe, Jason Dominguez, all those guys for Soto. As long as not all of these high-end prospects are going for a deal like that, if the Marlins can poach a guy like Volpe, I think that actually solves a lot of the long-term issues, because we know that there's a hole in center field, but shortstop, as you mentioned, that one's kind of up in the air as well. I mean, Jazz could obviously move over to shortstop, because that's how he sort of came up, right? But they have him at second base. There's some questions with Jazz's defense. At shortstop, he seems to have, or he had prior to the injury, settled in defensively there at second base. So do you move him again? So there's questions there. I feel like Volpe, and being a little bit older than guys like Brown for the Blue Jays, he might get to the show a little bit faster, which would sort of help. And if he does transition over to third base again, like that left side of the Marlins infield nothing's set in stone for them now or in the coming years. They don't have one of their headline prospects at either of those positions. So it would be interesting if they could flip somebody like Lopez for someone like Volpe, because it would make sense long term, and somebody who would probably make it to the Marlins within the next, I don't know, year and a half at most, maybe. So that's really, really interesting from a prospect perspective, and I think it would solve some problems down the line as well.
Yeah, and again, it changes your dynamic. It gets you more athletic.
Yeah.
It kind of plays into Lone Depot Park, which is a bigger park. And this going back to Gabriel Moreno for a second, and because I did make sure I when I was corresponding with one of my contacts about Moreno, and I thought this was going to happen to Jacob Stallings, that there would be an offensive drop off simply because of the ballpark he's playing at.
Right.
Among other things, he had kind of a career year a year ago in Pittsburgh offensively. But Lone Depot does not help him. He's got some power, but it's more on the pull side. We've already seen the park hurt him in the middle of the field with, some long flyouts. And I asked, would his bat play in a big ballpark like here in Miami? And was told, yes, he's a very good hitter, and so that, a little bit more of a hit tool, natural hit tool. And, it was funny because last year in the offseason, Alejandro Kirk's name popped up as a possibility. I think John Morosi threw it out there from Toronto as possibility for the Marlins as catcher. Obviously, he's kind of an interesting guy because of his body type, short and squatty and everything, but can flat out hit. And that guy's emergence, I know he DHs from time to time, but his emergence and their depth there, I think they got our own South Florida Zach Collins there in Toronto as well, former UM and American Heritage player, as depth, that it makes Moreno a little bit more available for, they're in on it, and so Pablo going to Toronto, the Marlins have done business. If I were to bet, I just kind of a hunch the Yankees might somehow end up with Pablo if he is moved. And before we move on with Pablo, it's something I was kind of just, spitballing an idea, like, what about San Diego? Send Pablo to San Diego. Fernando Tatis Jr. is starting to take BP. They got Kim out there who's playing shortstop. Could they steal CJ Abrams from him, which gives the Marlins that shortstop? And CJ Abrams also is athletic enough to play center field, 21 years old. Everyone that follows me knows how much I love that kid. But from what I understand, the Padres are more looking for offense right now than pitching. So I don't think that is going to be a scenario, but I try to think of a ton of options. That was one of them. But this is, before we segue away from Pablo, to me, the Marlins, let's make this clear. He doesn't have to be moved, and there's no guarantee he will be moved. And the Marlins, I was also informed, can afford to keep him.
Yeah.
That they can sign him and go for it. But David, to me, if I don't trade Pablo Lopez right now, then I'm working on signing an extension with him.
Yeah.
Because if you're not going to move him when his value is the highest, then you commit to him, and then you're committing with, Sandy, Pablo, and then, wait for Yuri. Now that pushes you to, do you just, because the relievers alone that we're mentioning are not really going to land you. Maybe it does, but more than likely not. But you have to part with somebody. And Trevor Rogers, teams are interested in Trevor, and it's not. But it's natural to say we're selling a little low on him because he's not at his peak. But controllable lefty, who's still doing 96, 97. Mostly mechanical issues are what's slowing him down this year. That another team would give a pretty good haul. So if Pablo's off the table and he's a Marlin, just your thoughts. Sign him long term, and then be open to everybody but Yuri. Who are you willing? Prospect pitching are you willing to move?
Right. So, I mean, if they do trade Pablo Lopez, it's going to be a sad day because he has been such a good pitcher for the Marlins over the years. He's been somebody that, we've seen him have some real success, including what he did last night with his performance. So if they do decide to trade him, it is by no by no stretch of the imagination, it would be sad to see him go, because I enjoy watching Pablo Lopez pitch. But again, as you said, it makes sense if they ultimately decide to deal him, because they have this sort of depth of pitching talent coming up behind him. Now, the worry is when you look at what happened to Max Meyer, for example. I mean, coming out of the game after, what was it, 10 pitches, elbow discomfort. I mean, everything screams Tommy John at that point. And at this point in the season, if he gets Tommy John surgery now, we're talking about him missing probably all of
next year will be gone. Yeah.
So, what you worry, dealing a guy that's had success at the major league level, relatively consistent success, you worry from a depth perspective, because you need pitchers and you need pitching, which I guess is why he would bring back a decent haul. If they ultimately decide to hold on to Lopez through the trade deadline, I absolutely think they need to sign him to an extension. And if they pivot to maybe trading a guy like Trevor Rogers, because they've got some other guys coming behind him. I mean, we've talked about Yuri many times over the course of the season, but a guy that we haven't seen pitch yet because of Tommy John surgery is Jake Eder. He's another one that will be sort of hitting the majors in the not too distant future. Obviously, Luzardo is working his way back. He's got a rehab start today for Jacksonville. So the Marlins have some arms that would, sort of fill out the rotation. If they dealt Rogers, if they kept Lopez, then they probably should deal one of these other guys, just to bring an infusion of talent to, at the very least, the upper levels of the minors, if not the major leagues. Because, as you said, the Marlins are 4.5 games out, but it feels like they're 45 games out of the wild card race, because the lack of consistency on offense is what has really, really hurt this team. So, if they were able to deal from this pitching depth to address some of those offensive concerns, and we've seen them do this in the past. Obviously, when they traded Zach Gallen for Jazz is probably the best example of it. But if they make that deal, I mean, hopefully they're bringing in somebody who can make a difference, offensively, instead of just bringing another sort of pitching prospect, right? And we know that they want left-handed power, because that's what plays best at Lone Depot. It'll be interesting to see how JJ Bleday looks at Lone Depot when they come back from the road trip. But just to get back to your question, if they don't deal Pablo, I absolutely do think they should sign him to an extension, and they probably should look to deal one of those second-tier guys to see what they can get, from a prospect perspective, to maybe jumpstart some of the offensive production here at the major league level, because Jacksonville's got some guys that can hit. It's just a matter of, figuring out how the organization at its highest level, at the Marlins themselves, how they can score consistently.
Yeah, no question. And, as you noted, 4.5 out. But you look at how you're trending. It's not just where you are in the standings or where the standings are. And if, like the Giants are in this kind of a little bit of a free fall right now. The Cardinals are getting beaten a bit right now. But the Marlins haven't been trending in a positive path northward. And they got severe injuries. Yeah. You're without Cooper. You obviously without Jazz. Soler isn't there. Yeah, you might get some pitching back, but you're not, you can't really go all in on this one. It's not like you came storming back from 20 out or 20 under to 5 under and making your move, and the momentum's pushing you that way that you're like, you know what? I think this team could finish maybe, fourth in this, with the fourth, that first wild card, not the third one. That right. Maybe I do kind of go for it. They're not trending that way. No. And they're just kind of a house of cards right now, which is the dangerous place. You don't really want to be right there. Yeah, they're in a tough spot. Because if you fool yourself and you keep Pablo, you keep Trevor, maybe you move Bass and get something, and that's it. And any of these guys get hurt in August, you blew a big opportunity. And that's, the front office can't, so you have to have the conviction that we're not really in it. We're going to make moves. We're not going to, obviously, you're not moving Sandy and you're not moving all 5 starting pitchers where you have no shot. that, okay, you do this. Let's say Blade stays hot or whatever gets hot, shows he belongs, and it's going to be pretty good. Jesus Sanchez picks it up with Soler out. And next thing you know, you're kind of right there in September, just 2 or 3 out, and you somehow, get that 6th wild card. And even if you sneak in and win a series, okay, well, that's a nice little, end of your season. Yeah. But from an evaluation and organizational standpoint, I don't know how you could evaluate other than I got 4 or 5 guys. Joey Wendell's among them, and teams are definitely in on him. And, like we say, Pablo, teams are in on Trevor. I guess John Heyman said that Cooper is attracting attention from LA, the Dodgers. And it's like you have to explore those, and you kind of have to hope a couple of them pan out. Otherwise, you're just kind of hoping the same roster is going to kind of put it together. And, they, by their own doing, acknowledge it's kind of a stagnant offense.
Yeah.
As it was constructed to be healthy. So that's why, when people ask why should they trade, someone like Pablo, because he has the chance to change your organization in a really more impactful way. And then the cost and then the concern of injury in the past, if that bites you and you end up getting nothing, or you could just try to win. If you go 82-80, you're going to be happy. Well, you could say they had a winning season.
Right.
But, at the end of the day, does it really matter if you're 77 wins or 82 wins? Either way, you're not there. And then you're just kind of hoping next year, which, you make another leap forward. And then you're basically going to have to say, if you don't want to trade anybody, then you have to sign free agents that are impactful. And that's not really the way they're built. Everyone says, do it the way Tampa does. Well, Tampa's not afraid to trade Blake Snell. Tampa's not afraid to trade anybody. Evan Longoria, you can't trade him. They're not afraid to trade anyone. And then they locked up a young guy. So you want to do like them. You lock up like they did with Sandy, who he's not homegrown, but they got him kind of as a prospect right there. So he kind of is. You make your move on Jazz, and those are your really long-term guys. And then the other ones are, that's just the way it is. You're not going to go get Aaron Judge. You're not going to just go and jump into that market. Some people are saying trade Turner, and it's like, you're going to get that kind of money for a guy who's, there's you're not going to be able to do anything else if you have him.
It's interesting that we're talking about potential free agents and things like that. And when you look at the current front office's track record with free agents, it doesn't look great. And I wanted to ask you this, Joe. I know, or we know, that Lopez is on the table. Basically, anybody except Sandy is on the table, right? And Lopez seems like the most likely. We talked a little bit about Trevor Rogers, but then the bullpen guys, as you noted, Anthony Bass, Stephen O'Kurt, probably not going to be a big time, trade if and when they get.
You get a younger version of them,
right? And then with guys like, I don't know, Jesus Aguilar, or even somebody like Avi Garcia, do you imagine, or can you foresee the Marlins maybe attaching a prospect to Avi Garcia to get him off the books? Is that even a possibility?
That would probably be more of an off-season one because, okay, the teams that you're dealing with, yes, any trade could be made. That's why last year when the other reports of the Marlins with Brian Reynolds, it's like sellers don't usually trade with sellers in season.
Right.
It doesn't really make any sense because, we're both going to finish in 4th or 5th place anyway. Let's just make a trade at the deadline. So you're really kind of, and if your focus is there, then you're not listening to what the contenders are telling you, and you don't really know where the realistic trades are, because those are the ones that have the best chance to be consummated. Yeah. Injuries to Yankees pitching has created the need for a starting pitcher,
right?
Which makes Pablo a perfectly attractive piece to the Yankees. Avi would have to be going to a club that needs Avi.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like a team that we need offense, and we feel in our ballpark and in our lineup he will perform better than he's doing in Miami. And if the Marlins eat, half of the contract, then okay, let's go and do it. I don't see him because of the money that is attached to him. Like an Aguilar who's making $7 million this year, whatever he's owed, a little over $3 million, or whatever that could be left on that deal. That's a much easier move for them. Now one's an outfielder, one's a first baseman / they both get DH, both provide, a real, for the most part, obviously a good professional at bat. I know his chase rate's been really high this year. I think there's, factors of that. I think the ballpark affected him a little bit more than he thought it would. And I think just handling the expectation of the contract is something that I think that's affecting Castellanos in Philly as well. Right. It changes how you're looked at. You've got all this money and expectation, your preparation, and both of those guys next year will probably be much better than they are this year. But that's another story. Again, I don't see it as an in-season thing, an off-season thing. But then you're going to, why would a club need Avi Garcia that much? They need to.
I wonder because we know. I mean, like the Marlins, the prospects that we've talked about quite a bit, they're blocked at the major league level by some of these guys, and it took Soler landing on the injured list in order for JJ Bleday to get called up, and he's looked okay so far. He's looked competent in the batter's box. I mean, I think he just missed 2 homers in addition to, the 2 doubles that he already has and things like that. So he looks like he fits. And obviously we've seen Lewin Diaz have a lot of success at the AAA level. Hopefully he can sort of bring some of that with him and perform offensively here at the major league level. So you wonder, like, how do the Marlins kind of clear spaces for these prospects, because some of the guys that we're going to talk about here in a second, I mean, they're also in some of these spaces as well. So it's really, really complicated from that perspective. Do you have any insight on like the roster construction at this point?
I think that they just naturally were thinking injuries are part of the game. You never know when they're going to happen. You need the depth. Sure. But they weren't expecting the guys that normally get hurt staying healthy. And then it created that, situation at first base, which kept Lewin down. Then Coop got hurt. And then, so now Lewin's here. With Soler, now the interesting thing is JJ wasn't supposed to be called up when he was. He basically was going to be called up next month. But Soler's injury, coupled with Gerard, and we'll get to him in a minute, from what I've been, what I'm hearing, they are working with him on certain stuff. They love Gerard. The power's certainly there, but there's some things that the coaching staff and the player development have been working with him on. So you would have basically gotten off that routine and got him up here, because he was the one on the 40-man that had pushed JJ here a little quicker than they probably thought. Now, from JJ's perspective and personally for him, I'm happy it happened that way for him because he's from the Pittsburgh area. He debuted in Pittsburgh. It created a great baseball moment. So for the player, and I think JJ was kind of as ready as he was going to be.
Yeah,
I know his holes, and he's going to work on that. But he kind of is where he's going to be. He's either I think if he stayed in Jacksonville, he would hit the home runs every few days and have his good days and hit about 230 and trend a little bit better. But the big leagues now, he gets a taste of that and sees, how they handle him. And I think I've noted it before, certainly on the Second podcast, that I didn't really want JJ up thinking he has to be the savior of the season. Right. Rather just let him play. Obviously he's competitive. He wants to play for something, but not to be, they brought him up to get them that spot. But let's get over to Jacksonville because, one of my people was there not long ago, was watching the Jumbo Shrimp and really liked their roster, and likes Charlie LeBlanc, likes Peyton Burdick, and those guys are considered big leaguers. I know there's a push to get everybody up and get them on their service time clock and all the roster manipulation at the same time. But there was no rush for Charlie LeBlanc. I know you could sit around and say they got Astudillo, but if somebody came back a little faster, what do? They'll DFA him again. And this way you not start optioning Charlie real fast for what? You
Right.
rush him in there to replace Andy or Jazz or whatever. I do anticipate he'll be up in August, or certainly by the call-up time. And this guy, from what I understand, has a chance to be a solid utility player in the big leagues. So just, be patient with it. Other than, I know people get all excited if he's down too long, but I don't think he's down too long. It's like he's certainly not hurting his development being there. And when he gets here, he's going to be given a chance to be kind of a Joey Wendell type guy and see if he could be that, and maybe not the full package of Joey Wendell, but a guy that could play multiple positions from the right side, not left, and do some damage. Peyton Burdick, from what I'm hearing, the reads with the scouts like Bleday better than Burdick, but they like Burdick as a good fourth outfielder, a guy who has a chance to be a pretty solid big leaguer in the role that he has. If he develops into more than that, into a regular, so be it. And the fallback plan, if they don't land a center fielder in a trade in the next few days, don't be shocked if in the second half you see, Burdick and Bleday getting time in center field. Yeah. But, what's interesting, it's one thing to play in center field in Cincinnati, which is a small ballpark, to Lone Depot, a lot bigger outfield, a lot more ground to cover. So those are factors to consider as well.
Yeah, so just to piggyback on that last point, Burdick, as you can see here down at the bottom of the graphic, he has 34 games in center field for Jacksonville this year. And Jacksonville plays at literally the biggest ballpark in the International League. That center field is 420 feet straight out. So it is a big ballpark. So it plays a little bit like Lone Depot in that regard. But he's been pretty solid. 236 batting average, 785 OPS, 12 homers, 14 doubles, 44 RBI. He's starting to heat up here in July. Over his last 15 games, he's hitting 295 with a 902 OPS, 4 homers, 13 RBI, and he's lowered that K rate to 18.7 during this month. He's at 25.4 for the season. He's been reliable. Obviously he's been out there with Bleday, who looked good. And just to go back to LeBlanc for a moment, his numbers have actually been arguably the most impressive from an offensive standpoint for the Jumbo Shrimp this season. 299 batting average with an 880 OPS, 14 homers, 20 doubles, 45 RBI. He does have a high K rate over 86 games, strikes out 27.6% of the time. But after a slump where he fell into a 1-for-15 slump, in about mid-June. Since that slump, which lasted for about 5 games, over his last 20 games, he's hitting 329 with a 922 OPS, 3 doubles, 4 homers, 8 RBI. The Marlins picked him up as part of the minor league Rule 5 draft. They plucked him from the Texas organization, and he's a guy that has played sort of all over the place. He's played at first base, second base, third base. He's played in left field. He's somebody that really fits that sort of defensive versatility quotient that we know the Marlins value. So as you said, it'll be a matter of time until LeBlanc gets his call, hopefully. And then just to circle back to somebody that we mentioned a few minutes ago, Gerard Carnacion, with AAA this season. Remember, he started in AA, but with AAA, he's hitting 260 with a 792 OPS, 10 homers, 6 doubles, 25 RBI. He's got a manageable 25.7% K rate over 50 games at the AAA level, and he's really starting to warm up over his last 10 games, hitting 405 with a 1.295 OPS, 4 homers, 11 doubles. And interestingly, that uptick in production has come when he's lost some of the lineup protection around him. So Bleday's no longer in the lineup. Lewin is no longer in the lineup. So he's producing, even though opposing pitchers don't necessarily have to give him anything to hit. So those are the guys that we really sort of foresee kind of plugging the holes if the Marlins ultimately make a move from their major league roster. And we know that those guys will be sort of quality major leaguers, or hopefully be quality major leaguers as they produce, because they've been quality players at the AAA level for sure.
Yeah, and again, it's development. I think that gets lost. I think people they get wrapped up in numbers, and we all look at them. They give us an indication, but minor league numbers I don't look at as some others do, because you look at the player, you look at the skill set, you look at their age, you look at are they there as or depth to provide, like you say, are you there to be power hitter to help JJ Bleday see more pitches? That type of stuff happens where a player, an organization, they may get a bunch of like the Derek Dietrich types, and you get those players who played in the big leagues with some success, wrap them around some minor leaguer prospects that you like to offer protection. You're not there necessarily I'm using just Derek as an example,
right?
That your eye is on the prospect, not necessarily the guy with the better numbers, because those numbers can be deceiving. Because I will say this, and from multiple people that scouts, that the gap between AAA and the big leagues has never been greater.
Yeah.
So don't just assume a guy hitting 250 or with an 850 OPS that's just going to translate easily to the big leagues. Just there's reasons, and as long as the process is usually good with those guys, I just see when I'm talking about the LeBlancs is just just a matter of when. It's like they don't. It's not so much, why are we running out? Whoever at the big league level, they're kind of treading water right now because the injuries created them grabbing guys off the taxi squad, guys who can be DFA'd, and they're not going to, then they'll probably just get reclaimed, go back to AAA and come back up in these emergency roles rather than burning options and stunting development, because you want them to play, and you don't just necessarily say, go and play in this game. There's usually a plan. The minor league in player development, there's usually a plan for each player. Now, granted, those change a lot because of injuries and so forth, unexpected stuff that happens at the highest level all the time. But you still want to get the player in the best opportunity to succeed. And again, maybe some of the numbers are a little deceptive on any of these guys, not just Charlie, that the organization might just have a reason for not making a move.
Yeah, I mean, we know that if they make these moves, these are guys that at this point have probably earned a shot to fill some of those roles. We saw Gerard for a minute at the major league level, and he had a moment. But Burdick and Leblanc are sort of the next guys in line for the Marlins, at least at the AAA level. And if the Marlins ultimately deal those bullpen guys, Bass, Okert, they do have some arms that are ready to step into those roles as well. Guys that we've talked about in the past. Andrew Nardi, his lefty at the AAA level, he's looking really good. George Soriano, a right-handed pitcher at the AAA level, also looking good. Numbers, as you said, not like eye-popping, but still really, really consistent. And a guy that we've talked about a few different times, 32nd round draft pick in 2019, Josh Simpson. He's another lefty. They have him at the AA level. He's been incredibly impressive this season. So these are guys that could potentially fill those holes in the bullpen should guys like Bass or Okert get dealt in the next week or so. And those are guys that wouldn't be sort of DFA fodder. Like, I mean, we talked about Brazoban, either last week or the week before as a potential fill-in. These guys aren't going to be those types of fill-ins. When these guys get called up, they're going to get an extended look because the Marlins aren't going to want to automatically DFA any of them because.
And then they're on the 40-man, and then you create a 40-man log jam. So it's a matter, I'm sure, with LeBlanc finding the right time to get him on the 40-man as well.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting how it plays out over the course of the next couple days. Really, we're down to the final days before the trade deadline. Trade deadline is August the 2nd. Obviously, if the Marlins make a big trade between now and then, we'll jump on and talk about it from a prospect's perspective. And if the Marlins make a deal, we will do all the research and give you a heads up on who's actually coming to the Marlins organization and how it all will play out from a prospects perspective. And Joe will have you covered with Eric and the other guys over on the Man on 2ND podcast. And really with the 5 Reasons Sports Network, I mean, we've got you covered not just on Marlins content, but also Dolphins. Their training camp has started. You know, we've always got the heat off season. All of that is really sort of going on. Look at that. 5 Reasons.
Hey, Ethan hooked me up. I got a hat now.
Nice.
Yeah, I've arrived.
Speaking of swag, you guys can get your hands on a Dugout mug. If you check out the link below, dugoutmugs.com/manon2nd, you can get one of these really cool looking drinking vessels to enjoy the beverage of your choice. As always, like, subscribe to the network, turn on notifications for when all the shows come on. If there's anybody that you want us to talk about in the future, you could leave a comment below. You could tag us on social media. I'm at @DL Fernandez on Twitter. Joe is at Joe Frisaro or at Man on 2ND, either one. But Joe, we've got some exciting days ahead of us with the trade deadline. Thank you for your time as always. And thanks for watching.
Yep.